It's Ken Rutkowski, voice of disruption, of course, learning about people that are disrupting the planet with their own ideas. The guy that's sitting right across from me, he really started off as an educator, and then he found YouTube to be a way to connect with the world, and now he's just taken it way, way beyond. Do we call you Mr. Veritasium? Do you even go by that anymore?
I do, yeah, I go by Veritasium.
What is Veritasium?
So, I mean, it's a lot of things. One of the things it is a YouTube channel with nearly 5 million subscribers and nearly 500 million views. Wow. And all the videos are about science, anything that I've found interesting over the years.
Okay, and you've been doing that for how long, Derek?
About 7 or 8 years now.
7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And as you have gotten a little older, you got kids, you don't do as much on the YouTube channel, but it's still got tons of views.
Yeah, it's still going, and it's nice to be able to have all that content out there and for people to still be watching it. And I try to update it when I can, but obviously, you know, having a baby about a month ago, you know, things have been slow, but, you know, I'm hoping to get back into it and do some more.
Do you ever look at what you did on what you're going to use to educate your own kids?
Yeah, and sometimes I think about, you know, the lessons I learn when raising kids, and it makes you think about everything again in a new way. Like every word you teach them, everything you're saying, you kind of imagine it from their eyes and what it sounds like to, you know, someone who's never heard that before, and it sort of opens a new window on how to communicate and how to educate, I think.
So let's go back. You started off as an educator?
Yeah, more or less. I did a PhD at the University of Sydney in physics education, essentially how to teach people physics via the medium of film. Okay. So that's actually kind of a hard thing to do. A lot of people come out of physics and feel like they're not physics people. And I feel like that's not true. Like, I think everyone can understand physics. Just depends on how it's taught, how your teacher engages with you, and kind of how much you care about, you know, the subject, like what your intrinsic motivation is.
Don't you think?
But I think anyone can learn it if they desire to, and they have the right teacher.
Theoretically, if it's the teacher could teach you anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've done that, and then you found a way to just make the transition to YouTube to teach almost anything.
Yeah. I mean, I taught for 7 years in Sydney at a tutoring company. Then I quit my job, quit working full time, and I started making YouTube videos in 2011. And that was like, it was a crazy transition because I had a great job. I loved what I did, and I taught wonderful kids. I worked with great colleagues. My friends all thought I was crazy, you know, to quit all that and just start making YouTube videos. And it didn't really pay off for a couple years, but since then it's really grown, and it's been, like, I think the best decision I've ever made.
When you say it didn't pay off, you say economically, financially.
Financially, like, I could not pay the rent, you know, based on that for a year or two. So after 2 years, I could finally quit working altogether, and I stopped teaching entirely and was just only on YouTube. But for the first couple years, I was doing a little bit of teaching to pay the bills.
A lot of the videos that you did in the past, they're not cheap to do.
No, yeah. There are some where, you know, I'll travel to like 10 countries. So sometimes I try to piggyback off other things I'm doing, like if I'm giving a speaking gig somewhere, and I can also, you know, film at facilities there. Or if I'm shooting a documentary, then I can also shoot YouTube content around that. But it's always important to me that that feels like, you know, organic and something I'm passionate about.
Anytime that was life-threatening, teaching physics?
Yes.
Really?
Well,
on a YouTube video, you almost...
Life-threatening, I mean, it depends what you say, but I mean, when there's this video about the most radioactive places in the world, for which I went into the basement of a hospital in Chernobyl, or the town beside it, Pripyat, which is basically where the firefighters were brought after rushing into this blaze. And what they didn't know was essentially pieces of the core had blown everywhere, and so these are like the most radiation that people have ever really experienced. Was these firefighters experienced it, and within hours, you know, we had 30 of them dead, or 35. Basically, everyone who went in was dead, and all of their clothes were contaminated in this really horrible nuclear waste. And the people at the hospital realized that, cut off all their clothes and put them into the basement. And then after that, the hospital was abandoned. So their clothes are still down there, the firemen's helmets, boots, all that sort of stuff. It's all down there, and it's all still super radioactive even 30 years after the accident. I mean, much less now than it was then, but it's still pretty radioactive down there.
So did you pick something up?
No, I think, you know, we talked about this carefully, and we wanted to minimize risk. I had a badge with me that was monitoring the radiation exposure for the whole trip. And, you know, if you stayed in the basement for about an hour, you'd be experiencing what you'd normally get in a full year of just sort of existing with natural background radiation. So, you know, it could increase your risk if you were to stay there for, you know, hours or a day. But we said we're just going to stay down there for 5 minutes.
So let's talk about the honest truth about YouTube.
Yeah.
You look at the revenue that you generate now.
Yes.
Content's there.
Yeah.
People visit.
Yeah.
It still ranks very high in search engines.
Yes.
Does it pay enough passive income? And when did that threshold begin?
That is a really good question. I mean, I would receive enough passive income from the channel now. As long as you're doing on the order of millions of views a month, I think it's creating a significant revenue stream for you. But to me, it seems like, you know, it is a decaying thing, and you need to keep creating new content to make sure that both that new content and your old content surfaces. So that's why it's important to do some sort of maintenance on a channel.
Meaning you add more content.
Exactly.
You have to, right?
I think that's important. I mean, if you don't, there's still, you know, there is still back end there, but it tails off over time. So the more you can keep injecting that, even just one video a month, which is kind of the pace that I've been doing recently, that sort of keeps things going.
It's got to frustrate you when you see somebody that makes cat videos, per se, and they have 5 or 6 million subscribers.
CAD videos?
Cat, C-A-T.
Oh, yeah.
Not computer
Sure.
technology. Cat, meow.
Yeah.
And they have tons of subscribers and viewers, and
Yeah.
all the work it takes for you to make one video.
Yeah. It's weird, though, because I feel like this is the thing. I mean, no one is really fully transparent about how much money, you know, you can make from YouTube, because it's a little bit... But the point I want to make is, depending on the type of videos you make, that also affects how much revenue you make.
Oh, really?
So, for example, if you were, like, I know this to be a fact, that if you're making edgy comedic content and you're using a lot of swears in a video, that'll be less advertiser friendly. So a lot of advertisers will bypass you, so you won't get a lot of ads against your content. Therefore, your CPMs will be much lower.
Okay, got it.
So it you know, family friendly stuff is great, and stuff that people can really relate to and think is valuable. So when you're doing educational and scientific content, that actually has a much sort of more profitable stream to it than doing something else.
So talk to the people that are out there that want to become a YouTube star. Is it as easy as it looks, or is it much, much harder?
I really don't know. You know, there's the thing of survivor bias, right? So when you have managed to find some sort of success in some area, you know, you may well feel like, oh, it's easy and everyone can do it. But the truth of the matter is you only feel that way because it worked out for you. And if it didn't work out for you, you'd say this is impossible. I think one of the keys to success on YouTube is diligence, consistency. It's all those things that are kind of hard to do. You want to aim for quality, but you also have to invest in it for a good time. When I started on YouTube, I said to myself, like, I'm going to give this at least 6 months before I even judge whether this is going well or not. And I was working at least 40 hours a week, maybe 50, 60 hours a week, making these videos, making lots of videos and putting them out on YouTube. And from time to time, you have a bit of a hit. And when that happens, that's when you start to see growth. So it's one of those things which is, it's a little bit sporadic. It's a little bit, you're never quite sure when the break is going to come. But once you get a break, and then 2 and 3, you know, you can start to build that into something that looks like a career.
What you thought about social media now?
Am I thinking about social media?
What do you think about it? Are you using it?
A lot of it I'm trying to cut back on. I was just reading this article about how kids in North America are much less on Facebook these days. You know, particularly, you know, people under 20 aren't on Facebook a lot. Maybe half of them are. And that's kind of a dramatic shift down from where it used to be. It used to be, now I feel like Facebook is aging up, for example. I feel like I try to avoid a lot of social media because I want to feel more connected with the people around me and with my life and with my kids and with the things that I really should be prioritizing. I feel like I call it the economy of distraction, or the distraction economy, where we have so much kind of free time now, even if it's just waiting in line or like stopped at a red light or whatever. You know, people are constantly going to those tools to distract them from thinking about the things that are perhaps more meaningful in their lives, but probably more difficult to think about.
Okay.
And we can easily distract ourselves by flipping through Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is. So for me personally, I try to avoid those things because I feel like I don't want to distract myself from the important things I want to stay focused on.
I want to throw a word at you.
Yep.
Just give me a definition. How do
Sure.
you feel about it?
Okay.
The word is timing. What do you think about the word timing?
I think it's super important.
Explain why.
Well, so some people may say that, you know, if you are a talented entrepreneur or something, timing doesn't matter. But I would push back against that and say, you know, there was a right time to, you know, start Atari, or there's a right time to start Bitcoin or Uber. And, you know, once those things are out of the bag, it's not the right time to necessarily go that way. You always have to be looking for something new. I think, you know, for me getting started on YouTube, I kind of had, like, I wasn't sure it was going to be my career. But I thought if I get in 2010, 2011, by the time this is even bigger, by the time, I mean, you could see the convergence of TV and the internet coming a long way away. You could see that back in 2010. So I was basically saying, I want to position myself in a way that I'm known as a guy who can speak eloquently about scientific topics, and, you know, I could be one of the next great science communicators. So I wanted to position myself in that way, and that's why I got in early. You know, I think that timing is important to see what's coming ahead and to plan for it.
So timing is not luck.
Timing is not luck. No,
Just
absolutely.
checking. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make. I mean, I think timing is about prediction. Timing is about reading the current situation, where things are going in future, and picking your spots.
Okay.
It's the same if you're a researcher, if you're a scientific researcher. You don't want to pick a spot that's already been fully mined. You want to pick the spot that is going, you know, where people are going to be next.
So as you move towards the real world type of work, you know, you're working with different companies. I know you're doing films, documentaries, and I know that YouTube channel was your narrative. That's what you would want. So when you see something really exciting, a new advancement, let's say in CRISPR or in space technology or in magnetics, do you almost say, I gotta make a video on that now because I'm inspired and I gotta get that story out? Or do you kind of sit back and wait to see if other people make that story and you kind of piggyback off it?
No, you have to pick your spots.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think when you see something coming up and you think, this is going to be huge, that's the time to get in early and be ready, you know, to go full guns blazing when it really does peak.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's always worth being a little ahead of the curve, but you don't want to be too far ahead because then, you know, it's like the first wave of electric cars. They got nowhere. And then there's that documentary, like, who killed the electric car? Well, like, yes, it was dead, but it's not going to be dead for long. In a couple of years, it'll be, you know, huge. Again.
It would be huge. You're right. Last thing, I said it earlier before we hit the record button. STEAM or STEM?
STEM is what I would say.
Science, technology, engineering, math.
Yeah.
No art.
I mean, it's funny because, like, I'm a guy who loves to mix science and art. I made songs about science, and I love various forms of art and doing things creatively. I just feel like if there's a push for STEM, I can understand that that's a pretty cohesive little set. If you want to add the A to be more inclusive, then I feel like, well, aren't we just talking about everything? Like, why not add English and history? And, like, you may as well, like, say, yes, let's learn everything, which is great. Yeah, let's learn it. I'm all for learning everything, but I think there's a meaningful reason to keep it to STEM as you know, we want to push in this direction, or a kind of technical direction.
Derek, thanks a lot for being on the show.
That's a pleasure.